Welcome to this explainer. Today we are going to dive straight into the incredibly complex and frankly fascinating ecosystem of global financial crime. We're going to play the role of financial detectives, basically following the money right through one of the world's most dynamic regional hubs.
Let's kick things off with a pretty staggering number, 1.75 million. In 2024 alone, the Bank of Thailand reported that commercial banks suspended about 1.75 million mule accounts. Just let the scale of that sink in for a second. That is an industrial level of illicit financial activity happening right under our noses, relying on the very banking systems we use every single day. So, to understand how that staggering volume actually happens, we're going to follow these illicit flows through 5 crucial steps. We'll look at the crime convergence hub, drugs in the scam economy, trafficking and influential networks, laundering through trade and crypto, and finally, building resilient financial controls. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Crime Convergence Hub.
First up, we really need to establish Thailand's dual identity. It's undeniably an economic powerhouse, a tourism haven, and a thriving trade hub. But because of those exact strengths, it acts as a crime interface through a concept called convergence. Convergence is basically when legitimate infrastructure, like sophisticated banking systems, global logistics, and bustling trade routes, overlaps with and is actively exploited by illicit criminal networks. It's a bit of a dark irony, really. The exact same world-class systems that power legitimate commerce and make the region thrive are being weaponized by syndicates to move illicit value. A single location might act as a source, a transit point, a destination, or a financial interface at completely different stages of the very same criminal operation.
So, what does this all mean for financial institutions and investigators? Well, it means we must completely shift our mindset. It's no longer about simply ticking a high-risk box for a whole country and walking away. We have to move from a lazy country-level view to actually understanding specific exposure at the network level. We need to be asking, which customers, which sectors, corridors, and products create exposure to this specific criminal economy?
Section 2. Drugs and the scam economy. To really understand the hub, we have to look at the predicate offenses that are actually generating these illicit funds. The 2022 National Risk Assessment highlights the sheer diversity of the threat here. It spans everything from traditional Golden Triangle narcotics trafficking, where roads, rivers, and ports are constantly exposed to heroin and meth flows, all the way to malfeasance in office, illegal gambling, and public fraud. It really goes to show that criminal syndicates aren't just one-trick ponies. They're highly diversified, complex enterprises. But there's a fascinating evolution happening right now. We're seeing a major shift from regional drug running to an industrial-scale scam economy. Across the broader Macomb region, traditional drug operations sit right alongside sprawling scam centers. These centers use social engineering, fraudulent investments, and romance-based manipulation to target innocent victims globally. And how do they move the money they steal? Well, right back through those 1.75 million mule accounts we talked about at the start.
Section 3. Trafficking and influential networks.
Now is time to look at the human and political elements. We're talking about the actual people operating within and sometimes trapped inside these scam and drug networks. Here is a pretty dark and tricky evidential reality that investigators face every single day. When a bank flags a suspicious transaction from a mule account, who's actually making it? Sometimes, sure, it's a willing participant. But very often it involves deceptive recruitment through fake employment, or migrant workers trapped in severe debt bondage. The very person sitting in a scam center making that suspicious transfer might actually be a victim of human trafficking who's been forced into criminality. It absolutely requires a highly victim-centered approach to untangle the exploited from the actual organizers.
And speaking of those organizers, how exactly do they get away with it? Well, look at this number, 33 out of 100. That is Thailand's score on the 2025 Corruption Perceptions Index. Now, while that doesn't prove any individual wrongdoing, it provides absolutely crucial context. Corruption kind of acts as a protective umbrella for these trafficking and procurement networks. It enables illegal gambling, protects scammers, and manipulates natural resource exploitation.
To exploit this environment, criminals hide their influential networks using layered corporate ownership, rapid director changes, relatives acting as nominees, and shell companies that lack any real operational substance. So the key takeaway here is that financial institutions literally cannot rely solely on a piece of paper or basic registration records. If the behavior, the funding, and the decision-making suggests someone else is secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes, you have to dig much, much deeper.
Section 4. Laundering through trade and crypto.
Okay, so the syndicates have successfully generated millions in illicit funds. But how do they wash it through the legitimate system?
Well, one primary laundering tool is illegal online gambling. Syndicates utilize very specific behavioral indicators, incredibly high transaction velocity, perfectly round value transfers, and dozens of totally unrelated counterparties. They'll move funds rapidly from banks to e-wallets and then quickly convert them into offshore crypto assets. While crypto itself isn't inherently suspicious, the risk absolutely skyrockets when it's dumped into unhosted wallets outside of transparent, regulated markets to sever that money trail entirely.
But it's not all digital. We also see syndicates following the money into the physical world through trade-based money laundering. They'll disguise proceeds using over-invoicing or under-invoicing, phantom shipments that literally don't even exist, and false descriptions of goods, whether that's electronics, wildlife, timber, or precious stones. This is exactly why investigators have to test the true economic reality behind a trade. You just can't trust the shipping documents or invoices blindly, because the buyer and the seller might actually be colluding with each other to move value, not products.
Furthermore, we have to keep a close eye out for targeted threats like terrorist financing and proliferation financing. The terrifying thing here is that seemingly low-value or perfectly ordinary commercial transactions can actually mask geographically concentrated terrorism funding, like informal transfers in southern border areas or sanctions evasion for dual-use goods. This requires deep context. You can't just flag a transaction because it's a large amount of money. You really have to understand the specific end use and the broader network involved.
Section 5. Building resilient financial controls. After tracking how the criminals operate step by step, we finally arrive at the modern detective's toolkit. The source material provides a highly resilient 6-layer control stack. It starts at layer 1 with a specific, nuanced risk assessment, avoiding blanket de-risking. Then it moves up through ownership analysis, integrating fraud and AML intelligence, and applying advanced network analytics, using graph-based investigations to connect shared devices, addresses, and wallets. Finally, it tops out with risk-sensitive trade monitoring and 24-hour rapid response channels. You really need the whole stack working together to be truly resilient.
And this leads us to a vital realization, captured perfectly in this quote: account closures alone will not disrupt networks that recruit replacements quickly. So the crucial point is that true effectiveness isn't measured by how many generic alerts you clear. It's measured by intelligence quality, actual funds recovered, and total network disruption. Think back to our hook at the beginning. Just closing one of those 1.75 million mule accounts solves absolutely nothing if the syndicate can just coerce or recruit a new victim tomorrow. You have to take down the underlying network.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Is your control stack actually following the risk or just closing the account? To truly manage this complex, incredibly intertwined exposure, financial crime leaders must stop ticking boxes. We have to start hunting the underlying networks. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structure helps you grasp the true scale of the challenge. Until next time, stay focused and keep learning.